Under the previous order, the senator from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I do want to speak on behalf of the McCain Amendment and regrettably against the underlying legislation. We all understand the reason we're having this debate. Without exception, every person in this chamber is convinced we need to act to jumpstart our economy. People across the country are facing hardship. More than 860,000 properties repossessed by lenders in 2008, more than double the figure for 2007. American manufacturing is at a 28-year low. 1.9 million jobs have been lost during the last 4 months, or were lost during the last 4 months of 2008. The economy shrank at a 3.8% pace at the end of the last calendar year, the worst showing in a quarter century. The unemployment rate now stands at 7.2%, 7.6% in my home state of Mississippi, with many states even less fortunate than mine. These figures are a sobering reminder of how much we have at stake, but that is also why we need to ensure that we get this right. Part of the reason I voted against the bailout last September was that I thought it was rushed. The senator from Arizona just acknowledged that it was done in a hurry. We were told that if we didn't act in a matter of days, the world as we knew it might come to an end. I think there are many members of this body who now wish we had taken more time to ensure that the TARP legislation was done right. Let's learn from that experience. Mr. President, the bill we're debating this week is an unprecedented bill in its magnitude, a staggering $1.2 trillion over 10 years. As a matter of fact, when I came over here to wait my turn, I was handed a legislative notice, and actually the bill now has a net impact on the deficit of $1.273 trillion. Including $389 billion in debt service. That means that the interest on this bill is almost 0.4 trillion. I want to take a moment to put into perspective that amount of money. Many of us here in the chamber have heard these examples over the last few days, but they're worth repeating to the American people. And I can assure my colleagues that the American people are beginning more and more to listen to this debate. The entire Vietnam War had an inflation-adjusted cost of $698 billion. This bill's $1.2 trillion. Our involvement in Iraq has cost $597 billion. This one piece of legislation is over $1.2 trillion. FDR's New Deal, which many have tried to compare to this plan, pales in comparison with an estimated 2009 inflation-adjusted cost of $500 billion, less than half the amount of this one piece of legislation in current dollars. On top of this massive spending request, let's also remember that we're being told, should this legislation pass, the President will then send up to the Hill another $500 billion package to prop up the financial sector. For those of us keeping score, that would be close to $2 trillion in spending when we factor in the cost of the interest. And all of that is in addition to the $700 billion bailout bill passed last fall. It's hard to get a firm grasp of the magnitude of this spending. I'll say what other colleagues have said. If you began spending $1 million per day on the day Jesus was born, and you spent $1 million per day every day since that time until today, you would still not have spent anywhere near $1 trillion. Or to put it another way, if you have $100 trillion in $100 bills, and if you connected all of those $100 bills end to end, they would encircle the earth 40 times to get to $1 trillion. Back in my home state of Mississippi, it's been reported that this package could mean $1 to $2 billion in projects for our state. What that means, though, when compared to the magnitude of the bill, is that as little as 0.1% of this spending would make it back to my state in projects. Now, 0.1% return is not a good investment for Mississippi taxpayers, and it's not a good investment for American taxpayers, especially when, as the senator from Texas just pointed out, this money will have to be borrowed from China or other foreign governments if we can persuade them to continue lending us the money, and it will need to be paid back by future generations. The Congressional Budget Office reported this week that the per-job cost of this plan, even if the jobs created are what we're being promised, the per-job cost of this plan is from $100,000 per job to $300,000 per job. Now, when you take into consideration the fact that the average Mississippian earns $31,000 per year, it's hard for me to stand here and tell hardworking people back in my state that the most efficient use of their tax dollars is to spend up to $300,000 to create just one additional job for Americans. But that's what our own budget office tells us this bill will do. That's not the best use of American taxpayer dollars. We need to get this right. The American people deserve a maturely considered plan, Mr. President. As Thomas Jefferson reminded Americans in his day, and I quote, "Delay is preferable to error." Let's not rush into doing this the wrong way. Because generations of Americans, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, will pay for our mistakes. It has been pointed out on this floor today, and it's worth mentioning again, that we Republicans are not alone in expressing grave, profound concerns about the enormity of this spending plan and the effect it will have on the United States. President Clinton's former budget director, Alice Rivlin, agrees. She recently testified that we should not rush to spend the amount of money this project will spend on projects with slow spend-out rates. She said, and I quote, "Such a long-term investment program should not be put together hastily and lumped in with the anti-recession package," unquote. And hastily put together is what this program is. Alice Rivlin, President Clinton's budget director, went on to say, the risk is that, quote, "the money will be wasted because the investment elements were not carefully crafted," unquote. The words of the budget director under President Bill Clinton. $1 trillion is a terrible thing to waste. $1.273 trillion is a terrible thing to waste. Members of the news media understand this too. The Washington Post's David Broder, who's covered Congress for more than 40 years, a respected journalist, wrote on Sunday regarding this plan, and I quote, "So much is uncertain and so much is riding on it that it's worth taking time to get it right. And yet we're told we need to vote this evening. We need to try to vote today or tomorrow on this, the largest spending bill ever in the history of the United States. In order to get it right, this package needs to be laser focused on getting workers back to work, getting our housing market out of the gutter, and doing so in a way that doesn't waste taxpayer dollars. The Democratic leadership in this Congress said only recently that this package should be targeted, temporary, and timely. I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, this package today could more accurately be described as slow unfocused, and unending. Americans have real concerns over some of the spending contained in this package. $20 million for removal of fish barriers, $70 million to support supercomputing activities for climate research, tens of millions to spruce up government buildings in Washington, D.C., $25 million to rehabilitate off-road ATV trails, $600 million for new government vehicles, $150 million for honeybee insurance, and the list goes on and on. My friend from New York said a few speakers back, if you want to take this pork out, take it out. Mr. President, we could take it out with his vote and with votes of his colleagues, but we can't do it alone. But if he says take it out and he'll join us in doing that, then we're getting somewhere. These projects may have merit, but what do they have to do with creating jobs immediately? There's a process for considering these types of projects, and this emergency stimulus package is not that vehicle. I was pleased to hear the President speak recently, acknowledging the good ideas Republicans have and saying he wants to make sure Republican ideas are incorporated into this package. So what are those ideas? And why do I support the McCain substitute? First, we need to trim the unnecessary spending that doesn't immediately put people back to work. Secondly, this package needs to get right to the housing problem, because housing is what caused the situation we are currently in. Then let's focus more on targeted tax breaks for the working class and for the job creators in the United States, the small businesses of our country. The President initially said 40% of this package should be made up of tax cuts. Regrettably, we're no longer close to that goal. Senator McCain has proposed an alternative plan that does all of these things. His substitute plan costs half as much, thankfully, and offers focused spending and effective tax cuts. It eliminates the 3.1% payroll tax for all American employees for 1 year. It lowers the two lowest marginal tax rates for 1 year. We also need to accelerate depreciation for capital investments made by small businesses for 1 year. We need to improve tax incentives for home purchases. We need to approve early investment in national defense and military infrastructure priorities, jump-starting the economy while making Americans safe, and mandatory deficit reduction after 2 consecutive quarters of economic growth greater than 2%. If the stimulus package works and the economy begins to grow for 6 months in a row, then we need to rein in this unbelievably large spending bill and declare victory and then start working on a plan to pay for it. We also need to establish an entitlement commission to review Social Security and Medicare. I was delighted yesterday when the Isaacson Amendment was adopted, doubling the current first-time homebuyer tax credit to $15,000 and expanding it to cover all properties and home buyers. It's a small start. It's nowhere near the place we need to be in this legislation. But I congratulate the Senate for taking that step. As I stated earlier, Mr. President, this is an important debate, perhaps the most important debate we'll have this year. The President was right when he said that Republicans have good ideas, and I hope, as the President said, we can incorporate those ideas into this legislation. I hope we can make this package much smaller and much more targeted to jobs and housing. That's what the American people more and more are beginning to say as they're becoming more and more familiar with the details of this plan. If we pass anything close to the current proposal and go to conference with the House, does anyone really believe the final product of that conference committee will be less expensive? But if we pass the McCain proposal and cut the price tag of this bill in half and go to conference with the House of Representatives, it is my hope and prayer that that conference committee can report a package we can support in an overwhelming bipartisan manner that can bring about confidence in the American people and make us all proud. It's time to rebuild this package. It's time to redirect this package. We need to indeed make it targeted, timely, and temporary. And we need to do it today. We have an opportunity to strengthen this legislation so that it doesn't waste taxpayer money, so that it actually puts people back to work quickly and puts families back into homes and Americans back to work. The American people deserve to have us do this right. And I yield the floor.